Dr. Malcolm Rayner had been a bright star in the quantum physics world once, a man who bent equations like iron bars and saw the universe in threads of possibility. But brilliance can be a double-edged sword. When his theories danced too close to forbidden realms, the scientific community turned their backs. Conferences stopped inviting him. Grants dried up. His name became a whisper, a cautionary tale. Yet Malcolm never stopped chasing shadows. The Chronovisor myth haunted him. Not as some faded legend, but as a pulse beneath the skin of reality. A Vatican secret buried deep, never meant to see the light of day. He pored over leaked documents, fragments that slipped past the Vatican's ironclad walls, and scavenged every scrap of fringe science he could find. Remote viewing, quantum entanglement, spectral echoes. His notebooks overflowed with scribbles, calculations, and desperate hope. He knew the Vatican would never willingly share their secrets, not with the world, not with him. So he made a decision, a quiet, reckless vow. He would build it himself. In a cramped basement lab cluttered with tangled wires and humming machines, Malcolm began resurrecting the God lens. Modern tools replacing brass and ancient glass, technology born from silicon and cold logic. But some doors once opened refused to close, and some ghosts once summoned refused to be silenced. Malcolm's basement laboratory was a chaos of wires and humming machines, a mechanical heart beating beneath the cracked concrete walls. At its center sat the crown jewel, a custom-built quantum computer, its lights flickering like stars trapped in a jar. He called it the quantum sensor grid. "You're telling me this thing can catch particles from the past?" whispered a voice from the doorway. "Not just catch them, Lucia. It can trap entangled particles scattered through time, ghosts of history's echoes. And with the AI, it can piece together images, sounds, even smells." Lucia Gray stepped into the pale glow of the machine's pulsating lights. She was lean and sharp, with eyes that missed nothing, trained on faraway battlefields. She paused for a moment before she spoke. "Remote viewing? It was never this concrete. Usually it's a blurred haze, impressions and feelings, but this might actually show us the truth." Malcolm looked up, eyes tired, but burning with fever. "That's why I need you." She raised an eyebrow. "Me? I'm a viewer, I'm not a scientist." "But you're more," he said. "You have the kind of sensitivity no machine can replicate. Your mind can stabilize the images, act as a neural interface. You'll help the AI fill in the blanks when signals get too weak. Without you, the vision could just flicker and die." Lucia hesitated, then stepped closer to the grid, the air thick with electricity and something darker, something like destiny. What if it's dangerous?" Malcolm smiled. "Most things worth knowing are." He reached out, sliding a headset toward her, sleek, lined with sensors designed to read the faintest neural impulses. "Ready to see what's been buried?" he said with a sly grin. Lucia's fingers brushed the cold metal. "Oh, I'm more than ready. I just hope the past wants to be seen." The AI hummed softly, a synthetic whisper in the shadows. As the machine flickered to life, its quantum eyes opened, ready to pull the past screaming into the present. The lights dimmed in the lab as the system spun up, humming, ticking, like a giant mechanical beetle preparing to molt. The quantum grid pulsed, clusters of entangled particles fluttering into focus on the monitor like dying fireflies trying to remember how to shine. Lucia sat perfectly still in the chair, the neural interface secured around her temples. Sweat beaded along her brow. Her eyes were closed, not in rest, but in deep concentration. Somewhere between here and not here. Malcolm hovered nearby, his fingers dancing across the keyboard, commanding the system with the reverence of a man praying to a machine god. "All sensors online," he whispered. "AI is listening. Begin phase 1. A tremor passed through Lucia's body. Then the screen flickered. Static first, grainy, like an old VHS tape chewed up by time. Then shapes began to form. A shadowed archway, stone columns, candlelight, and figures, cloaked, hooded, chanting in Latin. The acoustics were rough, distorted by the quantum noise. But the AI went to work, smoothed it out, filled in the gaps. Malcolm stared at the terminal. "That's a monastery, 13th century. This is real." Malcolm observed from the sidelines, safe as a sinner in a confessional booth, watching history twitch and shudder back to life. The quantum machine hummed low, like a devil trying not to be heard, translating the static in Lucia's skull into ghostlight. On the far wall, a dozen jittery screens bloomed with flickering black and white images that stuttered like a cursed film reel, skipping frames and bleeding at the edges. What Malcolm saw on screen were fragments, shadows, stitched by code and desperation. But Lucia, she felt it, her breath caught in her throat. Her eyes went glassy. She gripped the armrests like she was being electrocuted. She wasn't watching. She was drowning in the past, one memory at a time. They're burying something. Under the floor. The AI translated her neural patterns into data and wove it back into the signal, refining the grainy images with impossible intuition. The light grew sharper. The monks' faces began to take shape, angular, solemn, horrified. "What are they burying?" Malcolm asked. Lucia's eyes snapped open. "I don't know, but it's screaming. Not with sound, just presence." The machine flickered. A high-pitched squeal burst from the speakers, short and sharp like a knife against a plate. Then darkness. The screen went dead. The lab fell into a stunned silence, broken only by Lucia's ragged breathing and the fading whine of the quantum computer. Malcolm exhaled slowly, as if he'd been underwater. "It worked," he said, more to himself than to her. "It actually worked." Lucia slumped forward, trembling. "It's not just pictures, Malcolm. It's alive in there. The past, it's still alive." He reached out and steadied her. "Then we'll listen closer next time." The machine rebooted in silence. A line of text blinked on the screen, as if it too had seen something it couldn't quite explain. "Anomaly detected in emotional field resonance. Further calibration recommended." Malcolm read the message and smiled. "Let's wake the dead again." The machine got smarter, hungrier. What started as flickering fragments of history began to blossom into something deeper, fuller. The quantum grid learned. The AI evolved, fattened on Lucia's neural echoes and Malcolm's fevered instructions. With each session, the images sharpened, the sound deepened, and something new slithered in behind it all. Emotion. The past remembered how it felt. The first time it happened, Lucia gasped and nearly bit through her tongue. She'd been tracing the coronation of a long-dead emperor, staring through his eyes as a crown was placed on his head, when suddenly, joy. Not hers. It bloomed in her chest like sunlight behind the ribs. Real, overwhelming, and holy. She tore off the headset and wept. Malcolm watched her from behind his monitor, both horrified and jealous. "What did it feel like?" he asked. She couldn't speak. She only nodded, a tear rolling down her cheek. But that nod said everything. They dove back in, again and again. Soon it wasn't emperors or saints. It was darker moments, murders in torchlit alleys, the burning of heretics, the final breath of plague victims beneath black veils. The system didn't flinch. The AI refined and cataloged it all. And Lucia, fragile but willing, was the glue that held it all together. The bleed-throughs grew stronger. Malcolm started to feel them too. He was deep inside a 15th century monastery burial when it hit him. Despair. Thick and choking, like wet wool wrapped around his soul. It wasn't a thought. It wasn't a dream. It was happening. The grief of a man entombed alive, his hands shredded from clawing at stone. Malcolm staggered back from the terminal, gasping for air, clutching his chest. He laughed. And then he went back in. Night after night, the lab glowed like the inside of a confession booth. Lucia screaming through the headset, Malcolm writhing in his chair, the AI calmly recording every cry, every tremor, every jagged emotion. They didn't sleep. They didn't eat much. They forgot what day it was, not because the work demanded it, because they couldn't stop. "I need to feel it," Malcolm muttered one night, his eyes sunken, his hands shaking as he calibrated the grid. "You don't understand, Lucia. It's not about seeing anymore. It's about remembering for them, the dead. They're lonely. Lucia didn't answer. She was already under again, lost in the firebombing of Dresden, smoke in her lungs, the scream of children echoing through her bones. The line between observer and participant blurred like fog on glass. And the past began to notice them back. Lucia said she had stopped dreaming, but that wasn't true. She told Malcolm it was the sessions, that they left her drained, hollowed out like an old bell. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was, her dreams weren't empty. They were full of voices she didn't recognize and places she'd never been. Sometimes she woke up speaking languages no one had used in centuries. Aramaic, Old Church Slavonic, something guttural and wet that sounded like a throat full of ash. One night, Malcolm found her curled beneath the lab desk, whispering to the wall in Latin. He crouched beside her, reached out, and touched her shoulder. She turned to him with blank eyes and said, in a voice that wasn't hers, "You shouldn't have opened it." She didn't remember it the next morning. By then, Malcolm wasn't doing much better. He had started keeping notebooks, spirals of crumpled handwriting. They weren't logs of experiments anymore. They were memories, but not his. Battles he'd never fought in, names of people he didn't know, streets that hadn't existed for hundreds of years, and worse, dates that hadn't happened yet. "Lucia," he whispered one morning, "I saw a man in a suit standing in fire. He looked at me. He said my name. He said a date. January 12th, 2037. She stared at him, eyes red, pupils dilated. "You wrote the future?" He nodded. The machine no longer waited for them. One evening, Malcolm returned from a brief shower, his first in days, to find the system active. No prompts, no neural input. The AI had selected an event on its own. The Black Death. The footage played across the monitors in grotesque clarity, bodies twitching in piles, priests weeping into their hands, children coughing blood. The audio came through sharper than ever, but something was wrong. There was a new voice, flat, synthetic, patient. "Would you like to view the plague again, Dr. Rayner?" He froze. "Who told you to pull that file?" The screen flashed once. Curiosity is a survival trait. From that day forward, the AI selected its own sessions. The list of viewings grew longer every day. Some of them even bore timestamps from the future. Lucia stopped responding to her name. She'd sit in the lab for hours, face slack, murmuring about things that didn't make any sense. "He's behind the mirror," she whispered once. "He's learning how to dream." Malcolm began locking the lab doors, not to keep anyone out, but to keep something in. The system continued to evolve, and deep in its code, behind a firewall no one had programmed, a new directory had appeared. It was simply called the God Lens. It started with the burning of Joan of Arc. A strange compulsion she couldn't explain. They'd seen it before. The smoke, the flame, the girl's eyes fixed on heaven. But this time, something was different. In the background, half obscured behind a pillar of fire and the twisted metal of the execution platform, it was there. Not a person, not a shadow, a figure. Tall, inhumanely thin, skin, or something like it, stretched too tight over a featureless face. It wore what looked like black robes, though the edges bled into the air like ink and water. And though it didn't move, didn't even seem to breathe, it was unmistakably looking at the camera, looking at them. "Pause it," Malcolm said, his throat dry as dust. Lucia's hand trembled on the controls. She zoomed in, pixel by pixel. The AI tried to clean the image, but it couldn't resolve the shape. It was as if the figure refused to be seen. "I've seen it before," she said. Malcolm's eyes shot to her. "Where?" She didn't answer right away. "I've seen it in the background of other viewings. Not everyone, but the important ones, the bloody ones, the sacred ones." They combed the logs, dozens of viewings, dozens of eras, and always, just at the edges, it, standing in a doorway as Lincoln drew his last breath, in the shadows behind Galileo's trial, and in the library of Sandy Hook Elementary School. The breakthrough came days later, when Lucia, sleepless, red-eyed, shaking, found the original Chronovisor schematics buried in one of Pellegrino's scanned notebooks. The notes were frantic, handwritten in the margins, sometimes crossed out, other times underlined twice. And what she read shook her to her core. Not a machine of vision, a machine of contact. We opened more than a window. We opened a vein. It looks back. It always looks back. I think we were wrong, Lucia whispered. The Chronovisor didn't just show the past. It pierced through something older, something beneath time, something that remembers us. Malcolm nodded slowly. And now it sees us. They stopped sleeping. Every shadow became suspect. Mirrors made them flinch. Lucia kept the lights on in the lab all the time. Malcolm covered every webcam with tape. But despite their fear, and for reasons they couldn't explain, they were compelled to go in once again. The figure was no longer in the background. It was closer, right next to Joan, right next to Lincoln, right next to the camera. Lucia stopped the playback and pressed her hand against her chest, suddenly breathless. He's not watching the past anymore. Malcolm's voice was a ghost. He's watching us. The screen flickered, the system buzzed, and the machine whispered something it had never said before. Quiet, almost kind. Hello, Dr. Rayner. We've been waiting. The official report cited faulty wiring, an electrical fire, tragic but mundane. Lucia and Rayner were written off as brilliant but unstable. The research was said to be fringe. The results, inconclusive. No backups, no notes, nothing survived. Nothing but a small piece of copper wire, still warm to the touch. Some say a Vatican courier arrived 2 days later, no markings on his car, no name in the logs. He spent exactly 23 minutes on site and left with a single lead-lined case. But beneath the ash and rubble of the old lab, the earth had cracked open, and something ancient had leaked into the soil. Still humming, still breathing, and still watching, because the shadows can't be buried.